Hello,
Hi, hello.
hello, Colin. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, I can hear you. There is an echo.
Oh yeah, we wish to make here so it will be an echo a little bit, but later in the talk show we will only use one.
Okay.
But is it terrible or just
No, it's good, it's good, it's fine.
okay?
Not so bad.
Okay. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, I can hear you. There is an echo.
Okay, okay. Okay. Thank you, Colin.
Okay.
Okay, we will start in about 15 minutes, maybe. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, okay. Thank you so much. We will continue to prepare here for technical, and I'll contact you later.
Okay. Thank you. Terima kasih.
Thank you, Colin. You're welcome. Uh, Morning, Colin and Veronica. May I ask you to open your webcam so I can spotlight the footage to the Zoom? Okay, thank you, Colin. May I ask you to open your webcam so I can spotlight the footage to the Zoom? Oh, oh, what? Some echo. Okay, thank you, Colin. May I ask you to open your webcam so I can spotlight the footage to the Zoom?
panel candidate, and I'll be your moderator for today's talk show. So, ladies and gentlemen, today's talk show will concentrate on the discussion of urban resilience, managing disaster risk of high-density urban area. Before we start, I would like to deliver the structure of the event today. First, we'll be hearing the opening speech from our Head of Urban and Regional Planning Master Program, Dr. Engineer Opa Chandra Dewi, followed with 6 presentations from our honorable speakers, then the question and answer sessions. For those joining us here today, we will also have a field trip to most disaster area in Iba, Pasar. Further details will be delivered after the session. Okay, before we begin our talk show today, I would like to kindly ask our speakers who are joining us online and participants to turn on your camera, and to all of us here, all the participants, please move to the stage for the forum. Okay, so let's start a quick tutorial. Do we have the body members here? Okay. Okay. Okay, so everyone online? Okay. Okay, let's take a picture. Okay, that was a very, very quick photograph.
Oh, bisa Pak, bisa.
Okay, everyone see it? Does everyone online can hear me? Hello, Holly. Hello, Karantabel. Okay, okay. So, without further ado, let us jump to our first reform today. A welcome speech from our beloved Head of Urban and Regional Planning, Master Program Engineering Faculty, University of Indonesia, Dr. Engineer Opa Chandra Dewi, Bachelor of Engineering, Master of Science. Mrs. Opa, the stage is yours. Okay. That's Oh, it seems we have some technical problem here. That's
Udah bisa.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Okay. Yeah. Sorry, we put it into us. Hello? Yeah, good morning. Please, let me introduce myself. My name is Opa. I'm today the head of government the University of Indonesia. On behalf of our dean, Professor Mehucha, please let me open the ceremony, the event for this very grateful event for today. But before that, maybe I would like to say hi for our guests in online. Mr. Colin and also Mrs. Veronica, thank you so much for joining us in this event. We are like different in different ocean now as well. Yeah. But thank you so much for joining us. And today here this morning we have in the room our guest speakers, Master Sunarbowo, yeah, Master Sunarbowo, and then Mr. Gamal, the head of the SMP University of Indonesia, and also, of course, here we have our beloved student from Urban and Regional Planning. So let me introduce first of all about the program. Our program is quite new. We already took like 2 graduates candidates from 2021 to 2022. So this is our second year. Hopefully we will have another year and more bright future with all of you in this urban regional planning sectors. For your information, our program is actually divided into 3 main specialties. One of them is the spatial planning, also environmental, and then the last one is transportation. So in our program, we have the regulations to conduct or to choose which one that we would like to make our specialties. Yeah. So without further ado, let me open the event. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Enjoy the show. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you so much, Ms. Opa, for the welcome speech. So, without further ado, now let us hear what our speakers have in mind towards our today's discussion, the urban resilience managing disaster risks of high density urban area. Joining with us in the room, we have Dr. Ahmad Gamal, Bachelor of Architecture, Master of Science, Master of Urban Planning, and a PhD. Dr. Gamal currently serves as the Chief Partnership Manager at CCR Smart City, University of Indonesia. He is also an Assistant Professor at the Department of Architecture, College of Engineering, University of Indonesia. And he is also our lecturer. Dr. Gamal obtained his master's degree in urban planning 2010 from University of Illinois at Urban Planning. Then he continued his PhD in regional planning 2016 at the same university and earned an outstanding doctoral student award. He previously pursued Master of Arts and Communication Management from London School of Public Relations 2008. His expertise has been nationally recognized through his policy-driven work at the Directorate of Property Alleviation in Indonesia Ministry of Development Planning. So, please welcome Dr. Ahmad Gamal.
Terima kasih. Suara saya dengar dan cukup jelas. Boleh selamat pagi Bu Opa dan Principal Provo dan juga Colin dan Veronica.
Sorry.
I assume.
Can you please?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
I assume that this was supposed to be delivered. So I'm was requested by Ibu to speak about disaster-related scholarship. As you have heard from my CV, I know nothing about disaster, but I know one or two things about planning. And I have been requested to speak about the relationship between disaster and planning and how it affects the scholarship on disaster-related topics in the as you have also heard, I have a lot of engagement with planners, and I'm currently leading the Smart City Research Center at University of Indonesia. I'm no longer the Chief Partnership Officer. I'm currently serving as the advisor of Smart City Center, simply because I'm currently the Director of Innovation and Science Technology here at UB, and I can't have double position. So if we move forward to the next slide, this is a glimpse of disaster scholarship in the world right now. And my apologies because it's very difficult to think about disaster scholarship, which is something that is a very qualitative thing to evaluate without actually looking at some numbers. So I like numbers, and I will present some of the qualitative questions that we have by quantifying them in a certain number. So if we look at disaster scholarship, we can think of disaster scholarship in two terms. Right? One is disaster risk and risk reduction, and one is mitigation or preparedness. There is significantly much more scholarly outputs in disaster preparedness in comparison to disaster risk or risk reduction. But in both topics, unfortunately, if you look at the numbers, for example, for disaster mitigation or preparedness, we looked at about 187 papers produced between 2017 and 2020. And if you look at what has been produced by people in Asia and Pacific, you would see that almost 150 papers is produced in Asia and Pacific. Indonesians, unfortunately, only produce about 50 of them. So if you look at how disaster scholarship is produced in the world, Indonesia contributes about 1/3 what Asia Pacific has produced, and about 1/4 of what the world has produced. I don't know if this is a good or a bad number, because that definitely tells us something about disaster in Indonesia, and that tells us about scholarship in Indonesia. Maybe there's a lot of disasters in Indonesia, or there's a lot of disasters to come. B, there might be so many things that we haven't known about disaster and disaster mitigation or preparedness that we want to make sure that we still produce more knowledge about disaster risk reduction or mitigation and preparedness. And if you look at the second slide, unfortunately, next slide, please. Who are the leading institutions? Here again, I would divide disaster-related topics, disaster risk reduction and disaster mitigation or preparedness. If you look at topics on disaster risk or risk reduction, most of the universities that will contribute to the leading papers between 2007 and 2022 are Japanese institutions. So, for example, the Hoku University, Keio University, Kyoto, Kangwon. I think this is a Korean university. National Research Institute for Earth Sciences and Disaster Resilience, University of Kyoto, and Yamagata University. So these are all Japanese institutions. And if you look at the Indonesian institutions that would lead the topics on disaster risk or risk reduction, There's Universitas Ciakuala, which is in Aceh, which makes a lot of sense because the tsunami happened in Aceh. And then Indonesia University of Education. So this is kind of an outlier, right? This university is in Bandung. And I don't think that we see a lot of disasters in Bandung area. Although if you consider landslides in Bogor and some parts of Florida as part of the disaster that is not happening in the future, is probably part of the reason why UPI and UPI scholars are going to be leading in the topics that covers disaster risk reduction. And then Yogyakarta State University. This is again the University of Yogyakarta, which makes a lot of sense because Marathi occurred in the Jogja region. But if you look at topics surrounding disaster mitigation and how we prepare for the fact that some disasters are unavoidable, you will see that all of the leading institutions are Chinese universities, Chinese polytechnics. There's not even Japanese institutions. There's definitely no Indonesian institutions. What does that tell you about disaster preparedness in Indonesia? This is probably not a very good indicator on how we think and how we produce knowledge on disasters, because we think more about the risk that is associated with disasters. We think about how we can reduce the associated risks with disasters, but we think much fewer or much less about how we prepare when disaster happens, because to a certain extent, some disasters are unavoidable. If you think about earthquakes, for example, there's not much method that has been developed to basically detect or anticipate earthquakes. What we can do is basically prepare for it. Next, if you look at the leading authors, next slide, please. If you look at leading authors, again, within the related topics of risk reduction, again, you see all Japanese authors there. And if you don't see a Japanese author, you see a Muslim name or a name that is not associated with the Japanese. Then most likely, if you go through, deep research, and you will find that that person actually works for a Japanese university, right? So again, even topics and authors surrounding risk reduction is dominated by Japanese institutions and Japanese authors. How do we call these as leading authors? One is that they are most productive in these areas. You look at between 3 to 9 papers they produce every year. And again, this is data between 2017 and 2022. So this is very recent. This is something that has been produced for the last 5 years. And they are leading authors not just because they're very funny. They're also the people who are most highly cited by other scholars. So these are the most impactful authors in disaster-related topics or disaster-related scholarship, right? So the number one author, Aiko Sakun, for example, within 5 years has been cited 83 times. So 83 other scholars cited Aiko Sakura within the last 5 years. So each year he or she has been cited at least 15 or 16 times. And if you try to look deeper to some of the names, you will also find people from Universitas Ciakuala, for example, and Universitas Negeri within these leading authors. So that's interesting, right? If you live in Aceh and if you're interested in writing a scholarly article about tsunami, for example, then most likely you will have a high impact because that is a very big disaster that happened within a lifetime, and that is a topic that is going to be very impactful in the scholarly world. But again, if you look very carefully at these people, for example, Rika Suryani, studying exam. And notice that she has double affiliation with the University of Indonesia. So most likely, this is a postgraduate student studying either her master or her PhD and writing about disaster-related topics for her master or her PhD dissertation. And that is the similar kind of situation that we find with Suhaimi, who has double affiliation with the First National Limaman and Chengdu University. So most likely, the people who leading authors, disaster-related topics, are not just application scholars. These are postgraduate students. These are people like yourself, right? People who are just doing their masters, but they're writing something on disaster-related topic, and because they're writing about something that is unlikely to be reproduced by someone else who is living in the area or who does not have local knowledge of that particular disaster, they can be very impactful. Next. Unfortunately, if you look at disaster preparedness or disaster mitigation, we don't find any Indonesian scholar within this list of leading authors. So we don't have currently a leading author on disaster preparedness. We don't even have, or we don't even see any Japanese authors there. So this is something that is almost predominantly or exclusively written and discussed first by Chinese or Taiwanese scholars. Next. Okay, so what are my points? These are my conclusions, and this is very temporary. This is something that is driven by data. So to a certain extent, I think this is something that is very well. But to a certain extent, it is the temporary conclusion because hopefully this is something that will change, right? One is that recent disaster scholarship is dominated by topics of risk and risk reduction, and much less on preparedness or mitigation, which I think, again, I'm not an expert on disaster-related topics, but I think as a planner, that's something that we need to pay attention to. Two, global scholarship on disaster risk reduction is dominated by Japanese scholars. I don't think this is a surprising fact, because simply, Japan is a country that is rich with earthquakes. So they need to be always paying attention to the risk that is associated with earthquakes, and to a certain extent, they need to reduce the risk that is associated with earthquakes. However, global scholarship on disaster mitigation and preparedness is dominated by Chinese scholars. I'm not sure what that tells us about disaster or what that tells us about scholarship. But if we pay attention to Indonesian scholarship on disaster risk reduction is led by scholars from Aceh and Jogja regions, which makes a lot of sense because all of these scholars probably write about tsunami in Aceh or disaster that is related to Marathi. And to a certain extent, I think my suspicion is that these are students, but most importantly, is not the fact that these are students, right? If you want to be leading authors, then it makes a lot of sense for you to collaborate with institutions that is digging within a certain or particular topic. So in this case, if you want to write about disaster risk and disaster risk reduction, then Japanese scholars within Japanese institutions are the dominant figures in that. So I think the lesson here is that if you collaborate with people, then to a certain extent, you will also be in that list of leading authors as well. So one way of saying something about disaster-related topics, disaster-related scholarship in Indonesia, is that there is a significant opportunity for Indonesian scholarship on disaster preparedness. That is the opportunity for you to be a leading author in that particular topic. That is very diplomatic way of saying that I don't think much I could bring on that. And I think that is a significant part of knowledge that we need in Indonesia, because there are certain disasters that is unavoidable, and what we can do is to be prepared for those kinds of impacts. So by that, I will close my presentation. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Gamal, for such an opening presentation. So apparently, there's still limited scholars from Indonesia, especially on the preparedness in disasters. So let's ask. So we'll listen to an overview of disaster-related scholarship in Indonesia. Now let's move on a little bit further for our country in Asia. We have here joining online with us, Veronica Bell from Australian Red Cross. Hi, Veronica, can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
Sorry. You can hear. Okay. Wait. I think yes.
Unmute.
Okay. Hi, Veronica.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Wonderful.
So, hi, Veronica. How are you
Hello.
today?
Going really well, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so what I'm going to do, I know everyone here already praised with her. So kindly welcome Miss Veronica Bell.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay, so hopefully I'm going to address the remit that you gave me, and I'm going to talk a little bit about disaster resilience in the Australian context, and also the approach that Australian Red Cross takes in contributing to reducing disaster risk and strengthening individual and community resilience to disasters. If we can go to the next slide, please. Are we there? Yes. Okay, so the concept of resilience is increasingly being adopted by policymakers, practitioners, academics, and the general public. And it's increasingly relevant as we face future uncertainties, and everybody will be familiar with climate change and the increasing focus and attention that is getting. Resilience has many definitions and applications, and most are closely connected with the idea of embracing and adapting to a changing future and coping with both rapid onset and slow onset stresses. For Australian Red Cross, we recognise that disaster resilience can be developed and strengthened at multiple levels. It's an ability or a process rather than a fixed outcome or goal. So it's constantly something that is evolving and changing as the risks that we face similarly evolve and change and grow. And the individual, household, or community can be resistant to disasters, but they can't ever be completely safe from disasters or immune to their impact. So resilience strengthening and risk reduction is around how do you increase the capacity to cope with disasters that we cannot stop, but we can mitigate their impact. And resilience is not just about bouncing back or the immediate ability to respond to a negative event. Back to that perception of it being a process. It's a process of positive adaptation. And for it to be successful, it needs to happen before, during, and post an event. So back to the previous speaker, preparedness is a really important part of the disaster risk management cycle. as is the ability to respond effectively and to think about recovery. And like any adaptation process, it requires a long-term commitment. It's not something that is going to be resolved in a short time frame. And investment really does need to think about the long term. And for Australian Red Cross, our focus on resilience includes an emphasis on people's strengths and what they can do for themselves and for each other. So it's not a deficit model. It's not thinking about people who are impacted by disasters as victims of those disasters, but actually drawing upon what are the strengths and capabilities and assets that individuals and communities have that can be strengthened and harnessed to enable people to be able to withstand and recover from disasters when they occur. If we can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So in Australia, we have a framework which is the National Disaster Risk Reduction Framework. It's not urban focused in particular. It's a whole of society disaster risk reduction framework. It was developed and launched in 2018. And the Australian government system is a federal one. So we have a federal government, and then we also have state and territory governments. And collectively, they came together, together with local government representatives and other key stakeholders, including private sector, to co-design and develop this framework. It establishes a 2030 vision, goals and priorities, and is broadly aligned to the Sendai framework on disaster risk reduction and the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. And it outlines the foundational strategies for action to meet these across the 5 years from 2019 to 2023. So we're getting very close to the end of the first phase of this framework. And there's a lot of work underway to think about what comes next. The drivers for the framework are an acknowledgement that natural hazards are more frequent and intense, and Australia experiences significant impacts from natural hazards. I think most people will be familiar with the bushfires and the droughts, and currently we've got really bad floods here on the eastern coast of Australia. We're a very fragile context, and it seems to be very cyclical, the events that we're facing. Australia is also one of the most sparsely populated countries in the world, so it's a massive land mass, but we're currently a population of about 26 million, which I know is significantly smaller than Indonesia. And 74, just under 75% of the population lives in urban areas, and 60% of those people live in 5 cities. So in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Perth, and Adelaide. So a lot of concentration in a few locations, despite being a very large landmass. We understand that essential services are interconnected and interdependent, and people and assets are more exposed and increasingly vulnerable to the impacts of disasters. And disaster impacts are long-term and complex. And as our cities and regional centres expand to accommodate a growing population, there's an estimation that will hit 35 million by 2050. That there's increased pressure on the buildings and infrastructure needed to support our future communities, and increased exposure to risk, and particularly as climate change becomes more evident. And we also know that the impacts are long-term. They require long-term solutions. A major driver for governments is also the costs of disasters are growing. You know, we've had Since 2019 here, we went from the bushfires to the drought. We've gone from the drought to floods. I think the East Coast is experiencing its 4th flooding this season, this year. And so the costs of disasters are increasing. And there's increased momentum to address the financial impacts of a changing climate. So lots of drivers for this framework, and lots of impetus for people to work together to find sustainable solutions. If I can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So I mentioned at the beginning that the framework is aligned with the Sendai framework, and it has 4 priority areas. So the first one is increasing understanding of disaster risk, aligned with Sendai's framework's first priority of understanding disaster risk. And that really is around building everyone's knowledge and understanding of the issues that we face, and engaging people in developing responses. I can go to the next one, please. The second area is accountable decision making. So decisions needing to be accountable. And this again relates to understanding disaster risk and strengthening governance to manage disaster risk, and investing in disaster risk reduction for resilience within the Sendai framework. And again, this is focused on increasing understanding, increasing awareness, and ensuring there is accountability, so that decision-making processes and models include cost-benefit analyses, and they adequately address current and future disaster risks. When we're thinking about infrastructure investment, there is really good analysis that's undertaken. Disaster risks are identified and actively mitigated, and that frameworks are used to assess and reduce disaster risk across all environments, but particularly infrastructure, land use, and development planning. And I know this is something that is in the minds of urban planners everywhere, but as we're going through the 4th flood this year, there's big debate in Australia around where development happens. And if you go back to that comment I made about the population largely living in 5 urban metropolises in Australia, the pressure that puts on those locations, and the desire to look for places for further development is increasing the move to develop and build in areas that are probably not appropriate. So there's big debate around how do we manage that here. If I can go to the next slide, please. As I mentioned before, looking at enhanced investment. So looking at ensuring that disaster risk reduction investments target the high priority locally and nationally significant disaster risks. So understanding the risks that we face and investing appropriately to address those risks. And thinking about the broader outcomes when we're thinking about those risks. So looking at increased productivity, improved connectivity, and social inclusion. And also a pure economics angle is looking at investing in disaster risk reduction and resilience to limit future disaster recovery costs. I think we're all aware that most investment in disaster-related programs is in recovery. But there's a really strong economic case that investing in preparedness and investing in risk reduction will have not only a benefit for lives and livelihoods, but it has an economic benefit as well. I can go to the next one, please. And then the national priority 4 is around governance, ownership, and responsibility. So linking to Sendai's second priority of strengthening disaster risk governance to manage disaster risk. Again, this is focusing on bringing everyone together and ensuring that everybody is clear about the roles and responsibilities that they have and that they need to fulfill. Looking at mechanisms to identify and reduce disaster risk, and looking at cross-sector interdependencies. So, you know, I think we all recognized when we faced the COVID pandemic in 2020, it really did expose some of the siloing in, you know, disaster management and health management. You know, there was a real recognition that there needed to be a lot more cross-sector interdependency between those two areas and others, to be able to address the disaster that we were facing. Looking at transferring ownership of disaster risks through commercial exchanges, and ensuring that that's transparent and acknowledged. So again, it goes back to accountability and transparency. And most importantly, engaging all sectors and communities in a national mechanism to connect and guide efforts to reduce disaster risk. It's really important that everybody is involved, that all voices are heard, and that everybody who needs to take ownership is involved in the whole cycle. If I can go to the next slide, please. So that's all about the national framework, and Australian Red Cross has contributed to that framework. We monitor its implementation. We contribute to its implementation alongside other stakeholders in the Australian space as part of civil society. But we also have particular areas of focus and approaches that we prioritise through our work, both before, during and after disasters. And those are that we look at all hazards. So we focus on the consequences of disasters and other crises on people rather than on the cause. So we're looking at what is the impact on individuals and how can that be addressed. We take a people-centered approach, so ensuring that people are at the center and that nobody is left behind. As I mentioned at the beginning, we look at a strengths-based approach. So looking at what are the assets and capabilities and skills and knowledge that individuals and communities have, and how can they be harnessed and utilized. We have a particular focus in our programming in Australia around being trauma-informed, and we do a lot of work around addressing the psychosocial impacts of disasters and crises on individuals. And we're very mindful of how disasters and crises impact individuals, and particularly individuals who are living in locations where they're facing multiple disasters and cyclical disasters, and being really cognizant of that when we think about our responses. Culturally respectful, inclusive and accessible approaches. So ensuring that our programs and activities are culturally relevant. Australia is a very multiculturally diverse country, and we need to make sure that the programs that we're designing are co-designed with communities and that they meet the needs of all community members. They're relevant, accessible, and they can consider the individual cultural strengths and needs. Our programming also endeavours to consider, understand and embrace cultural practices to ensure that harm is not inadvertently caused, that by not thinking about certain things or not engaging the right people, with the best of intention, we could actually develop something that actually misses the mark. So we're very careful to ensure that our engagement approaches bring everybody into decision making. And we want to act on evidence, so that we want to ensure that our practice is informed by evidence and incorporates the best available research with practitioner expertise. So we do quite a lot of work with different universities here in Australia, We haven't worked with universities in Indonesia yet, but we're really trying to understand and build an evidence base of the lived experience of communities and individuals who are facing increased disaster risk, again, to help us design informed, thoughtful, evidence-based programming. That's it from me, I think. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
That was such a very inspiring presentation from Veronica Well. Okay, so before we continue our talk show, I would like to call the other two speakers are just joining us here in the room. The Honorable Dr. Priyo Hendrikus Andis Marmata, Bachelor of Engineering, Master of Science, as it is Indonesian Planner Association. Hello, Bapak. Also, you have here in our room the Honorable Dia Reni, as a coordinator for disaster management policy development in the Directorate for Spatial Planning, Land and Disaster Management at Ministry of National Development Planning. Welcome, Bu Dia. Okay, so it is indeed, I think it's quite different in Asia and Australia, as it is obviously a different location. And we have here Dr. Priyo Hendrikus Andis Marmata. Dr. Andi is widely known as an urban planner who has more than 20 years of experience in research, consultancy, and advocacy in the field of sustainable urban development. He earned his doctorate or a PhD in development studies from one of the leading research universities in Germany, University of Bonn, in August 2000. Following completion of his doctoral studies, Mr. Marmata has served as a lecturer at Urban Development Studies for Postgraduate Program and Master Program of Urban and Regional Planning, Faculty of Engineering, University of Indonesia. So with his 10 years experience in urban planning, I do believe Dr. Andi has a few things to respond in regards to the discussion today. So, Dr. Andi, please welcome.
Hi. Check. Okay, terima kasih. Good morning and good afternoon. I think Veronica and India in Australia. I'm very glad can be here as one of the panelists, and I also welcome Dia and Pak Sumargo of the AMI, Indonesian Red Cross, and of course William from American Red Cross. So today I also like to express my appreciation to the previous speaker. Has already illustrated the research landscape of Indonesia that has focused on the urban disaster topic, and also for Veronica also reminded us about the second framework, which are very useful framework for us to do our work as professional organization that lead in the urban planning practices in Indonesia. We also have some experience that perhaps can also contribute to this discussion. So let me let's say in the next 10 minutes to discuss more about how actually urban density, if we do not control or do not manage the density, the urban can also increase the risk, disaster risk of our cities. So, and we also try to promote the solution, the preventive solution from the spatial planning. Next slide, please. So, I will urban density manner in typical of the next slide, please. Okay, we look these pictures from mobile, so our Google Expo. When we talk about density, is rather conventional topic for us in development, right? We thought the density, we can also relate it to the what we call inequality. So if you see the picture how the uncontrolled, irregular settlement compared to the regular and the well-ordered settlement occurs in many cities in over the globe, in Asia, in US, and also in Africa. So this is also one thing that we need to remind for us if we're planning without urban disaster risk discourse, we need also to really overcome this density. But how then the density can influence the level of risk? Next slide, please. So if I follow the concept of the risk defined by the National Disaster Management Agency in Indonesia, the PP, there are three factors: hazard, vulnerability, and coping capacity. There are two main variables. The first one is the historical data of disaster occurrence. So we have in the Indonesia called IRBI, that's Risiko Bencana Indonesia. They compile all disaster events, disaster events in Indonesia. But the second one, you need also to investigate that we call probability of the climate impacts that has been, I think, for the last decade, it has been analyzed by the Met Office and also other research institutes in Indonesia. So there is hazard, and we need to anticipate it by bringing more precise modeling. The second is that we call the urban vulnerability. We usually talk about the status, the current status of our socio-economic, physical environment, also the percentage, and of course about people, the population and the diversity and also human groups. I think Veronica was best mentioned in this kind of framework how the people have really state. And then the last one is about the coping or adaptive capacity that the series of regulation, we want system, adaptive capacity, mitigating and also the so the level of which means hazard, cross vulnerability, and divided by the volumes. That's the risk that we have so far. Next. So this is the data of the IAP in the we have what we call them from the USID. We call disaster planning for integrating coastal and then this 10 years ago, so I need to refresh my mind. We have Tumbarong is the normal part of the garden next to the planting field. They experiment in the city of Teknik and also Pebble Park, and the high density you see the yellow cross and there are next slide.
This is activities in neighborhood unit. We begin with traveling normally survey, right? People who experience that. Why this is so important? Because it is also closely to the national objects. See, so the education, and I think this is also important. Not this one as the summer, I'm proud and informal both there, and also there are many informal programs on the side. This is also some visual, yeah, the last 10 years. As you see the Coordinator aisle, the road, that sometimes also involved in the high season. We have high density, they have also what we call minggu, yeah, in Indonesia, bahasa ini, island. So we give what we call spatial diagnostic on this area, and then found some what we call weaknesses in the settlement area. So this weakness can create more and more severe impacts to the people. That's right. Okay, that's the current situation, but also we need also to identify the futures. This is the concept that we try to bring. If you go to adaptation, then you have the red line. Then the y-axis is the economic loss. So if you do adaptation, then you have high area of the loss of revenue. If you did the spontaneous adaptation, then you can lower the economic loss, but still high area. But if you do the climate resilient development plan pathway, then you can identify. This is our scenario that we have us. Very well confirmed. I think we have also discussed before everything. But I think we will meet when somehow the discussion. Yeah. So this is the idea. So the future is that we have already predicted. We know the theory. We know the loss organization. When we can do more than one. What if we don't do the that one? Next slide. This is the example. From the water from city, we got water from city. If we do the comprehensive adaptation plan. So those housing there is 2-story. Before that, the second story can see the street. Okay, between the seawall, because seawall is very important. So then we cannot see it. And then again, sometimes we do have the error. We make and think with distance, and also with more practical knowledge that come from Andrea Rentos, Oscar Rentos, and Mr. Rentos. I think we can find more and more hidden variables that we need to consider when we do the side. This is also for the development planning that we to suggest. We have 4 priority sectors: marine, water, agriculture, and health. And we predict how percentage of our loss if we don't do the adaptation program. Yeah? So if you can see this, you can access it through the LCDI.NS
or you can go to the space. Right? So we know that if we only promote to overcome the disabilities, we cannot see any other development. When the local governments and the other institutions will resistant, will be resistant to move the solution. So we need to integrate this adaptation and mitigation, resource mitigation to the others. We will pathway that we call program. So we have only this program will accelerate the other program under this program. We also we need the advocacy to the government and capacity with the IPA. So this is so they're not important in the future because it is still women sports. Yeah, we need more and more important in ethics. But the first thing I think we need to get is the technology. Because this is the important tools for us to reduce the risk, increase resilience, rehabilitation. So this is the idea. If you do the good urban reform, that you can create a livable place to live. From the top that we call well-being of citizens. In our constitution, we call this the two, and then the second is quality of urban life, and the lowest can be healthy. So if you put the member to the standard, you go to the quality of life, and you go to get the of the school. So, many situation for us to achieve our goals. But again, from WHO, the International Health Regulation 2015, they are emphasized that they call urban planning as the instrument to increase the rate of health. The city become healthy resilient cities. But the next time we will discuss. So smart technology. So help us to make our city global and we can this. So what is the difference? Resilience and sustainability only different in the time frame, but in the essence of the concept is the same. It's about continuity of the system. If we talk about the social concept and also the living changes that come to our city, and how to make our city resilient to that slums and yes. But before sustainability talks about the future benefits, how our system can be still continue to accommodate for future generation. So if we can move the green and the blue one with the support of smart city, then we can create a local space. Yeah, that's our concept. To bring again how that we can reduce the risk of the resource. Right? So integration is trying to improve our detailed spatial planning. We try to finish our government in the spatial planning, not only look for the data, but managing the data. To start from continuous digital data using the volume of data of what and host. We have one map, we have one data, and we also introduce the digital data. We have many, I think UI as to the we also embrace with the platform that we
I think we have introduced from schools in the schools. And then we do participate planning. We do have more and more people events to what we call it, to us. What we do is we people for Teknik, importantly for the creative capacity, how we can make our economy good. We and we have more and more improvement for our planning policy, our recommendation. So we only succeed in making the continuity let's see the Antar November 8, how we can enforce our government to revise the standard. Next slide. This is one example. We plan to integrate global data into the platform. We are using the barcode, so people can use the link to put the photo, the uploads, or what they want to tell to the open platform. So that hopefully we can use. Next slide. We also can what do you call it? Engage with the women, young, and the youth also use have specific value for the platform. Next slide. We do also promotion by and economic. So don't make the economy economic and ecological. We can do the same time and the same purpose of this biodiversity, and this is also one of our work that can many work from the ISOPA. So the last thing that IAP also brought is how to measure the use of certain displays. Next slide. So we adding the yellow highlight means that we also input the urban listening factors. Certainly not we also bring the safety issues in this slide. So what the payment we can do approach meaning that we use the meaningful perception of our citizen. We will do classification, we will do that. Maybe this is more important, like a skill for how to measure the satisfactory of the perception. Next slide. This is the IAP and LCI super very simple, equal and special. Only for the self-reflection of the city, not to compare this. And one there are in the big, you know, because IAP and LCI, but we don't do directly. But the people maker means like, you know, one day. And we got the music from the mayors. IAP, we do that. Yeah. It's not our focus. Next slide. So we do minimum years, but we don't do 2020 because of the electoral time 2019 and only 2020, and we will launch the 2022 in November. So the city that involved in the survey can trace from 2009 to 2011 how we will go the cities. Next slide. So this is kind of the example. For example, Palembang from the low, medium, and top tiers. How much the payload? They not to compare Palembang and Palembang. So this is how we did. We don't do anything, but we only do for the overview. Yeah. Next slide. Okay. So again, the result can be taken. For example, urban residents do not feel safe from disaster.
this one is created disaster risk program without adding the resilient backline, but we can also we can do from the people. Next one. For this we can do it up, but the very important thing that from the our government we can make this as a baseline for the slide. Okay, thank you very much. I think what's that? Is resilient for the cities. We need first recognizing the multi-risk and then multi-sectors development movement. Only to one disaster risk program without adding more and more other benefit values, it is very difficult to have support, not only from the local parliament for the government budget, but also from the private sectors. And so you need really to integrate those disaster risks with sustainability, with livability, and with other agenda. Because in city we have so many agenda. You have renewable agenda, with SDGs, you have inclusive city, you have healthy cities, and you have other cities. It's not city that we got the lady from Indonesia, city in city for other. Because this is very, and I hope you can get this to this. Okay, thank you very much, Teresa, and thank you.
Thank you so much. That was like a very inspiring presentation. So I think there should be a lot of we need to be able and we need to aware what the overlapping agenda not only as for the disaster, but there is a sustainable and resiliency that we need to take into account for the urban planner. So let's move further away. We have here joining us as well. We have Pauline Fernandez. Hi, Sir Pauline.
Hi, hello, good morning. Can you hear me well?
Sorry. Hi, Sir Pauline.
Hello, good morning. Can you hear me?
Okay, good morning. So, Pauline Fernandez has more than 15 years of experience on disaster risk reduction and in what I'm more University of and Southeast Asia. Currently, Pauline is the regional technical preparedness advisor for the American Red Cross, supporting the national Red Cross and Red Crescent societies in Asia Pacific on resilient work. Prior to this, he was the ERR advisor of IFRC in South Asia regional region, and most recently in the Netherlands Red Cross in Philippines. He has also worked with other international NGOs, including the Action Aid. So without further ado, let us hear what Pauline Fernandez have. Please welcome Mr. Pauline.
Okay, thank you for that. Before I get into my presentation, I would like to mention thanks to the University of Indonesia for inviting the Red Cross, both the Australian and ourselves, to be part of this. It's not very often that we are part of the the academic discussions or where academia is. So it's good to see the collaboration between the humanitarian development community as well as the academia community. And it's really been a learning experience so far, from both the first presentation as well as the last presentation where you on the urban densities and inequalities. Now, when I was preparing for the presentation, I asked Miss Ova, how much time do I get? She said around 15 minutes. I said, okay, 15 minutes is good. I said, how many slides do you want me to present? She said about 3 slides.
Okay.
It's also, so it's 3 slides. I said 3 slides. I was thinking, how do I put all our work into 3 slides? So I said, okay, let's put more pictures than words. So if there's an English saying like one picture is like 1,000 words. So if you see that picture up there, there's around 20 photographs, so there's around 20,000 words on that first slide. So let me speak about urban resilience work of the American Red Cross in the Asia Pacific. Okay. If you see that picture right in front of you, the first slide, it shows a range of stakeholders there from our work in Indonesia, in the city of Ternate, in Semarang, as well as in a city of Vanuatu in the Pacific. And you see cross-section of different stakeholders. We have the university, we have the media, we have disability groups, we have pastors of the religious community. So everyone was part of it. Really, it is what the last presenter said, community engagement, engaging everybody into this discussion on urban resilience. So let's move to the next slide, please. So the American Red Cross, we have our international services department. There's also domestic as well as the international. And we work in Asia Pacific countries, as well as in Latin America, in Central and South America, as well as the Caribbean. Now, in the Asia Pacific region, we are currently working in 6 priority countries. So you have Nepal, Myanmar, Bangladesh, Vietnam, Philippines, and Indonesia. And when we say priority countries, it means that we have physical presence there and with our teams working with the Red Cross, Red Crescent, national societies. Apart from the 6, we have worked in other countries as well on projects, for example, in Vanuatu, which is not a priority country, but still we work with the Vanuatu Red Cross on urban resilience. We worked in Micronesia as well in terms of wash and sanitation and urban resilience. We also help the national societies in terms of if there is an immediate response to be done, if there's earthquakes or tsunamis, etc., and flooding. So we are also there on short-term basis. So when we say priority country, we're really there for the long-term basis, working with the national societies in building their capacities, work, and also for them to help communities build resilience. Next slide, please. So who are our partners? And of course, this will also be similar to the Australian Red Cross. Like our first and foremost partners in the countries where we work with is the national society of that country. In Indonesia is PME, Indonesia Red Cross, Palang Merah, Indonesia, as well as Nepal and Vanuatu or the Vietnam or Bangladesh. So that's our foremost partners. We also work with the IFRC, which is the Secretariat, the Federation, ICRC, as well as, depending upon the context and the opportunities in the countries, we work with the UN, INGO, civil society organizations, universities. In Indonesia, we have been working, PMI has been working extensively with the University of Bogor, and they've been consultants on a number of studies which we have done. So in Sri Lanka, we have worked with the University of Peradeniya. So we have worked with universities on assignment basis to deliver more informed evidence-based research which can inform our decision making at the national level or subnational community level. Next slide, please. So what are we doing in terms of urban resilience? Now, I put a collage of photographs there, and I'll try to summarize based on those photographs. First and foremost, to work on urban resilience, we need to have that institutional level commitment there. And of course, within American Red Cross, in our international strategy, our focus is building resilience of communities. And when we say communities, it is both the urban community as well as the rural community. We also have our international climate change strategy, where one of the focus areas is, working on climate resilient cities or climate resilient urban areas. And that could, if you expand the scope of it, it could be a lot of issues we can be delivering with. It could be in terms of nature-based solutions, where the last speaker spoke about, green spaces. It could be on the heat, where we see, increasing heat driven by climate change. It could be even in terms of planning and urban planning. So policy is one. The second one is in terms of our programming and increasing our footprint on programming. We have done a number of urban DRR programs in the past, and where we have actually worked on, focusing on specific communities in an urban area. So that was really our previous approach. It was more micro rather than macro. And then in 2015, we received a grant from USAID to work on urban resilience in 3 countries. Indonesia was one, where we worked in Semarang and in Ternate, where PMI was leading. In Vanuatu, with the Vanuatu Red Cross in a city of Luganville, and in Myanmar on a coastal city of Monoman. And from that project, we shifted our approach to urban work, urban resilience, where we moved out of micro and said, let us be working on a macro or at the city level. And that's, I think, and also connecting the city level work with the community level work, because both aspects are important. And we see that if you work at the city level, they come up with policies, programs, plans, projects, which can affect communities or the walls of the city. So if you see photographs up there, especially the one in the middle, you will see, in Vanuatu, where we had brought the municipal corporation of Luganville, the different actors and departments of the government, to sit down and have the discussion about urban resilience. What are the hazards? What are the risks? What are the exposure levels, which happen at the city level, which can also have implications on the micro or the ward level or community. Even if you look at the photograph at the bottom, where you see Kota Tangguh in Ternate, where we had the representative of the city government to talk about and lead that process on urban resilience. And that's important, where it's a collaboration, it's a partnership of different urban stakeholders. Now, that's on terms of program. To help us in programming, there is also a need for guidance to the national societies to work in the urban area. Now, we have seen that the Red Cross is extremely confident of working in communities across the world. But scaling it up to work at that micro level, it has been a learning experience. It has been a challenging experience because of the complexity of an urban area. And so to support the national societies, try to understand, we came up with a couple of toolkits. You see at the on your right-hand side there was a city level risk assessment where we developed for the national societies how to work in coalitions or in partnerships. So these were guidance tools to help our national society teams learn and engage, and also increase that experience and confidence on working in an urban area. Another aspect also we saw was the engagement of the business community. Now, extreme left, you'll see in Myanmar, where we were able to engage with the coalition of small and medium enterprises, as well as a network of and a platform for building resilience in the business community. So, but we have faced challenges in getting the business community on board because of the language we speak. I think we speak more in a humanitarian development lingo, while the business community is more about investments, profit, loss, or where resources, the different capitals. So trying to understand each other's language, we both want the same goal, but how do we harmonize the language between these two communities? So that's the other one. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. So what from our experiences on urban resilience in the Asia Pacific, our learnings. One is complexity of the urban of an urban area. You would see the different systems there. You would have more tangible systems and non-tangible system, abstract systems, where we see the different power dynamics of a city, the political systems, the economic systems. Then you have the hard systems of education, health, transportation. You would have, the different players up there. So try to understand the systems in the city, map it out, see who are the influencers, and see how to engage. And of course, most important is having city government, the mayor, like we did in Semarang and in Ternate, the mayor leading that discussion, while PMI was the facilitator of bringing all the different stakeholders, partners together. That's one. So it's necessary to, let's go to the backside, not yet finished. So thank you. So it's taking a bit of more time right at the beginning to understand the city you are in. Now, the next one is everybody comes to the city for employment opportunities. It could be also reasons for better services, for example, health and education. And it also could be because of changes happening in the rural side. And climate change is going to drive displacement from smaller cities or bigger cities, as well as from your coastal rural into urban areas, because that's where they will need to go. We see from a recent ADB report from 2010 to 2021, there was 225 displacements, and most of them in Asia Pacific, and most of them were driven by natural hazard events. And a number of them would land up in the city. So cities are going to be at the receiving end for people coming in. And then how do we look at that, look at it from a very future perspective, say, how can we accommodate the inflow of people? What are the planning systems we need to put in place? What are the trends? Because what's going to happen when people come, they would end up going into the more informal areas of the city, where the last presenter showed that inequality between the city. You have the informal settlements and you have the big city, because that's where land will be cheap and accessible, and they have nowhere to go. So cities need to have more, future sight to plan better for the aspect of climate change and displacement into the city. So that's, I would stop there and hand it back to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Sir Colin, for the presentation. Okay, so we're listening to a broader perspective from both Australia and Asia Pacific. Now, let's continue our discussion back to Indonesian offers. So we have here from Indonesian Fakultas, the Indonesian Air Force Ground Marshal, Sir Sunarwo Sandi, Master of Science. As a Deputy of Secretary General of Indonesian Red Cross, Sir Sunarwo Sandi has a wide experience across the defense. He was a Deputy of Potential Development at the National Search and Rescue Agency, also a Director of Operational and Training at the National Search and Rescue Agency. He is also a Defense Attaché of Indonesia, New Zealand, and the United Nations Observation Mission in Iraq and Kuwait, and also the commander of 463 of Afghanistan. So, without further ado, let us welcome Bapak Sunarwo Sandi. Welcome, Pak.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Very good afternoon, distinguished course, the head of the UBI study program, Dr. Imo Chandra Devi. The distinguished guest speaker is Veronica Bell from International Development Specialist Australia Red Cross, Mr. Colin Fernandez, Regional Preparedness Advisor, American Red Cross, Mrs. Dia Menenggo Gandhi, Director of Special Training Management, the VP Regional Development, Ministry of National Development dan Governance, Mr. Ahmad Gamal, bukan Regional Indonesia, Bapak Dr. Phil, Menteri Studies Makta, Urban Regional Planning Association Indonesia. With fellow lecturers, students, and alumni of UBI and UI, well as the participant of this talk show. Thank you for the moderator for the opportunity given to the PMI for sharing our experience. As the objective for this event, I will share about disaster management for resilient cities and urban areas in accordance with the PMI mandate. PMI mandate on Red Cross Law number 1, 2018 said that the main duty of the PMI is to assist the government in the social and humanitarian field in time of peace and conflict, especially the task of Red Cross, including aid preparedness and disaster management, blood services, educating and training, disseminating information on Red Cross health and social services, and other humanitarian tasks. Specified in the look at the second here. It's very clear that the job is given by the government to PMI. And also we will see the video that when PMI had operation in Lombok, Palu, and Sunda State is part of disaster management of the response and recovery phase.
Salah.
Next room. PMI currently has 34 provinces and 478 districts. Have 3 hospitals, 49 clinics, 119 ETD, and also we have 6 regional warehouses and warehouses all one in region. Every disaster risk management partly is formed not only but any disaster management currently is formed not only disaster but also to the forecast has been done by the BMKG and also BNPB. As the action phase forecast of the preparation human resources, equipment, funding, logistics in the spot, including the alerting of the medical, as well as floating clinic in the Kalimantan. Based on the 2014 PMI urban study is agent that this urban area including quick flood and strong wind. PMI is experiencing Tangguh City program in Smart City, another city, with prioritizing partnership with local government and private sector. Activities like education and waste management in the community and schools, mitigation, like installation of the rainwater storage for item, early warning system, and for flood and landslide. In addition, KMI also experienced in building flood resilience communities in the upstream and downstream like up in the Chicago. Like what we had done with we had the research in 2016, we have received a teacher Citarum, Bengawan Solo, Perset, Kabupaten Bogor, Jakarta, Kabupaten Bandung, Panawat, Nugiri, Solo, Bojonegoro. With activities, connection with local government and private sector, CBT training and consultation. Observation well, repair cleanup, land use measurement, waste management, early warning sign, and education both community and school. In urban area, PMI also respond to the fire that occur during the dry season in collaboration with firefighters. We provide assistance to affected communities and the officer. This will happen last week in Desa Gambrong. Also, PMI provide helping for the food and shelter. When PMI also support the big events such as a holiday, Christmas, New Year's Day, as well as sport event including football. Lastly, during an incident, we provide the medical input. And that's all. Thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum.
Thanks for a very descriptive and novel presentation. So, I do believe that Indonesia have a wider vision, I think, for this. So on this matter, we have here joining with us Ibu Dia Lenggogani. So Ms. Dia Lenggogani is the coordinator for disaster management policy development in the Directorate for Spatial Planning, Land and Disaster Management at Ministry National Development Planning. She is responsible for policy coordination and formulation in the fields of development planning and nation development strategy, in providing direction to sectoral, cross-sectional, and cross-regional policies, national and regional macroeconomic framework of regulation, institution, and funding, and monitoring, evaluation, and control of national disaster management strategy implementation. So, without further ado, please welcome Ms. Dia Lenggogani.
Thank you, Marisa. So, Excellency, Ibu Ova, Head of School for Magister Urban and Regional Planning, UI, University of Indonesia, Director for Innovation and Science and Art, Pak Ahmad Rama, and then Marsha Sunarbowo. Andy is not here yet, so hello again, everyone. Nice to be here because I would like to share from the previous speaker. I'm sorry, I didn't mention Ibu Veronica Bell from the Australian Red Cross, and then Colin Fernandez from the Asia Pacific Red Cross, if I'm not mistaken. Yes. So again, I'm very happy to be here. Well, while the other speaker already mentioned about what's their activity within that organization, so now I would like to share what's the Ministry of National Development Planning of Fakultas doing now. So if I would like to explore the first slide, please. So Fakultas has already set the Indonesia Vision 2045. We have these four pillars And the mission is, the first is about the high quality of human resource educated in skill and master on science and technology is shared as the basis for our pillar in the human development and mastery of science. The focus is on the quality of education, cultural development, people health, and quality of life, science and technology development. Also, very important. And again, the second mission regarding develop economy, and which share as the basis for the sustainable economic development with the focus of foreign trade and investment, industry, tourism, marine economy, food security and farmer welfare, energy and water supply. Also, the last one is environmental management and disaster risk reduction. So this pillar is the basis on how we want to achieve the sustainability, also the resiliency, which already shared by Pak Andi. And the third mission is to achieve equal development, where the pillar is the development of regional with the equality in the development, focus on poverty reduction, business opportunities, and equitable income, strategic area development, infrastructure development. The last mission is on the strengthening national resilience and governance, which focus on substantive democracy, institutional and effective law enforcement, and anti-corruption and independence. So this is our agenda 2045, and I'm hoping that this millennium will then continue and then use this as our mission towards 2045. So next slide, please. So regarding the Indonesia, Golden Indonesia 2045, because urban or city is the place where people do their activities and is at the place of living. So we also have the National Urban Agenda 2045, which we would like to then connect the global agenda with the local agenda. So we have the global, the national, the regional, the provincial level, and the regency and district level, and we have the village level. So it's our characteristic, it is our challenge towards the future. So we have three main principles: social inclusion, competitive economy, and then green environment. And our framework for governance will start to then make a robust and very strong regulation, institutional, and financing, and also smart. So I'm happy that Pak Gamal share the smart and technology aspect, as digital transformation and economic transformation is also part of our agenda within this 5 years agenda or the next 5-year agenda in 2045. And our mission includes the 5 missions. I don't want to then read it one by one, but again, because we are from the Ministry of Planning, and then we start, and the government works by regulation. So we need to have a regulation which consider the integrated intercity and the regional planning, and we also need to prepare planning, norms, standard procedure, and criteria for urban management. So we work together with the Ministry of Public Works, Cipta Karya, and other related ministry, and we aim to have a transparent, accountable, responsive, efficient management for the use of information technology. Because previously, Pak also support in the urban, the city of Semarang and Ternate, ya Pak ya. And then Pak Andi also mentioned about data management in the city and district level, and also another responsibility of governance and Ministry of Finance is that we need to have integrated planning and budgeting. Because for the local government, we have a Ministry of Home Affairs as the assistant, the one that monitor and evaluate all the activities and connect the activities in the local government and connect it with the focus and the agenda in the national level. So next slide, please. This is the National Urban Policy 2045 for the first mission, they have 5 strategies strengthening national urban connectivity center. So we need to have a center for activities and also connected development with the medium large extraurban city outside Java, because we know that the west part of Indonesia is more developing than the east part. So this is also a chance to have a balanced development in Indonesia. Again, to prepare the development of a new national government center, the Nusantara capital city. So this is also on our agenda. To develop non-exploitative and development rural, urban linkage, and a strict application of urban growth boundaries, you know, because speaking about the Jakarta metropolitan, we need to prepare the boundaries of how big Jakarta and the surrounding area will be. It's the kind of challenge, and we know that like Bandung and then Surabaya and maybe Yogyakarta also need to consider that in terms of how the urban network builds and generate. So what has to say? I have to mute it like this. You can do this all. So again, to achieve this sustainable city agenda, we need to have index, because you know quantitative approach is easier to provide the image of what we would like to achieve. Again, sustainability is also mentioned in the SDGs agenda. So because Fakultas is also the coordinator for the implementation of SDGs agenda in Indonesia, and urban development is also part of how we would like to then develop our countries, the different characteristics of the urban and the rural area. We focus on the agenda 11 to make city more livable and resilient. And with this indicator in the SDGs agenda, we then try to modify it and use it as a target in the national level, the province level, and also the city and regency level. This would then be arranged into a system management that we would like to prepare. And again, the process within the planning and budgeting process is the priority for us, also the monitoring and regulation, starting from the annual plan, because we have the Musrembang, if all the students here know, Musrembang is the media for us to then share what activities that we would like to prepare an annual agenda or 5-year agenda, and we also would like to then now, starting 2025, prepare the 2025-2045 agenda, the long-term development. So index would be one instrument that we then prepare to count our achievement. Next slide, please. So part of this index, we use 5 dimensions. The first dimension is the urban system, but we don't special formula for the urban system, but the urban system is the aggregate amount of the achievement from the other 4 dimensions. For example, for the social content dimension, the index component will contribute from the formula of residential housing, urban transportation, social basic services, environmental safety, conservation. And also with the economy, urban governance, and resilient, green and resilient agenda, we also have this component to be measured. Because why? Because to know the development of the urban areas, especially in the city or the regency level, the monitoring tool and the result of this formula, the result of this measurement is a reference for us to prepare and set the priority for urban development in a city and agency level, and then use that as another way to prepare the next priority area to be prepared to be assisted by the national government. Next slide, please. So because I also asked to share about the disaster part, Pak Andi also mentioned about the disaster, and our colleague from the Red Cross Indonesia and the Australian also mentioned about disaster risk reduction. So I will share the step and what we are doing with the National Disaster Management Agency or Ministry, BNPB. We identify the bottleneck is that the existence of global plan transformation difference in the level of vulnerability and resilience is a new challenge in each region. We have a very different characteristic as in 7 big islands in Indonesia. Also, the capacity of the local government is needed to be increased because level of understanding and knowledge in disaster risk and climate change management is still various in different areas. Also, the access for the infrastructure for adaptation and mitigation for disaster risk, also the climate change, the same, and also the commitment of all stakeholders is also a challenge because maybe now, like the Red Cross is already committed, and we also have other NGO that support the disaster management in Indonesia, but we still work in silos. Like for example, we would like to start the confidence between the climate change agenda, adaptation and mitigation with disaster risk reduction agenda, because the UN organization is different. It's ended, so it's a challenge for us, and maybe all our core friends here can then start how we can prepare our priority to confidence, adaptation in climate change, and then the disaster risk reduction if it is within that area. So that's the step I already shared here also. The integrating of policy program for climate change and disaster risk reduction is very important, and we need to consider again community and agent. And the Red Cross Indonesia also already support, and they have the activities in various level, kecamatan or district, and then another pilot in Semarang and Ternate. Actually, it's not only Semarang. You mentioned Kota Palu, maybe Donggala, and Sigi, and maybe Yogyakarta. Actually, families contribute lots of disaster risk reduction. So the lesson that we can gather from family or other NGO is a very good example to be an input for the government to start setting priorities for convergence of DRR and climate change adaptation. Next slide, please. So what's next? Cooperation, partnership, and collaboration agenda. Why Pak Sunarbowo mentioned the coalition for disaster risk reduction, if I'm not mistaken, so it's a very good start, because now, even though the government is the duty bearer, and the people is the right bearer, but for disaster risk reduction and then maybe climate change is our, because resilience comes from individual. We cannot ask the government to set a resilient agenda, but then as the individual, we don't support it. And so again, setting who's doing what, within setting the development agenda is very important. So this slide is the starting, how do you say? Maybe I would like to ask everyone who is involved in the local government, national government, university, research institution, banking, private sector, civil society, media, and other overseas organizations to work together and start working on how we can prioritize and set what activities that would give direct impact to the target to have a sustainable and resilient nation. And what area is sustainable and resilient. So I stop here. Thank you very much, and Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Okay, thank you so much, Ibu Dia. So apparently, I think it's really important for not only just the government, the NGOs, and the community organizations to work closely, but it's also the academical institution also have several influence as well. So I think it's important for them to collaborate and to work closely together to achieve not only just the program resilience, but to how to set the priorities with this who's doing who's and what to put front first, right? Okay, I think we are now proceeding to our last session of our talk show today. I'm sure everyone has a lot of questions regarding this discussion. So please, we have here online as well, Ms. Veronica, Mr. Colin. If any one of you has some questions, kindly raise your hand, and for our online participants, we'll present the questions in the comment section or in the chat section. So, does anyone have any questions to ask to our speakers? Okay, we have Saskia here. Okay.
Kerasin.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity. My name is Saskia Ananda. I'm now student of University of Indonesia, Magister of Urban and Regional Planning. And I'm asking to Indonesian Red Cross, especially, if we talk about disaster, we always, preparation is always before and during the disaster and disaster occur. From the Indonesian Red Cross, what is the post disaster that we need to prepare for, especially in Indonesia, because we know we occur some many disaster, fires, tsunami, and we did COVID before. So what is we need to prepare for after the disaster? Thank you so much.
Okay. So
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for the situation. Well, if the based on our experience, disaster happened in especially Palu, Lombok, state of Sudan, and Western Aceh PD, 2016. Actually, we like in disaster risk management, like I've been told to you, that whenever determine or take the focus one record were mentioned by BMKG and BNPB as well. But like Indonesia, probably the time, so we mentioned many times about the weakness of the solar, what do you call it? The patahan. Okay, you understand what that is? Okay. See, and when so we distribute all the knowledge how to handle the situation by the time we decide. So And 2 months ago, before the happened, we PMI traveling all over the countries. This realistic PME how to handle the disaster. Because we are not planning for research center, we just actually kebetulan and just what happened is like that. And those in PMI district, we are ready. Like in Palu, before we came, they already evacuated more than 2,000 people from the wreckage and also the bodies, but 2,000 something. So it is the earliest person thinking of the disaster is MI compared to BNPB and the other agencies. So it is like you just mentioned that PMI also has been responsible for the people who had potential and disaster in some certain area like you was mentioning in Tangguh, Semarang Tangguh, Terapian Tangguh, Lampung Tangguh, what else? Lampung Tangguh, Aceh Tangguh. Think of this satisfied way of issue.
Okay, I think we also have some input very your question.
Exactly. That's why maybe you can share my last slide. I forgot that we already have one place. The last slide before we ask. So I think I hope our friend here you already know the disaster mitigation cycle. So that's the management side. So that is the based on the law number 24 2007, we have this disaster management cycle. So the cycle is pre-disaster response response and then post-disaster. So we have this preparedness, pencegahan bencana, mitigasi, mitigation. That is prevention, mitigation, and then preparedness, kesiagaan, peringatan dini, early warning system, emergency response, rehabilitation, and reconstruction. So, on the other hand, if you see the explanation and hear the explanation from Ibu Veronica Bell, where Australia uses two approaches. The disaster risk management, which focus on disaster risk reduction, and they also have the disaster management. Maybe Ibu Veronica Bell will also ask, but this is my interpretation from this table. So actually, if we want to build a resilient and sustainable city, for example, but we need to consider the environment, environment capacity, the carrying capacity, and then the risk, which also very mentioned with from others. So now, currently, from starting from 2008 until maybe 2019, we still focus on emergency response, rehabilitation, and reconstruction. Even though we already have the preparedness and early warning system, but I think we need to focus more, because if our friend here listen from the news when the tsunami strike Kota Palu, that the early warning system up for a moment, and then so the information is late. So why in the future we need to focus on disaster risk reduction, because we cannot expect only from early warning system. We need to understand the risk. So for example, if you're in Kota Palu, or we can use example from Smong, in Sibelu, where starting from a baby, the mother tank the small tongue. So when we're a baby, we listen to the voices, the voice that listen is like, yeah. So that's why as individual, yeah, as a community, the risk inform or understanding of risk is very important. So when we start to create a policy on certain area, you need to understand the risk and then the people, and then the setting the priority of activities that suit with the area that you want to develop. So again, I'm hoping that our friend here also can consider this cycle, this phase, and then set, and maybe you will go to the different area. Then try to set what if this area is on fire or there's a flooding there. So what's the preparedness activities that the community needs to prepare, or as individual, what we need to prepare? Again, the mitigation, maybe for like structural measure, and then preparedness, early warning system, and all the cycle need to consider when we set a plan in the area. So maybe that's that.
Okay, so I think it's quite related to what Lama has said. Like it's really limited scholars regarding the preparedness, so maybe there is some connection right there. And as what was mentioned by Veronica well, like it should be mindfully informed, well, like from what the Red Cross has experienced, what they have learned, I think. So is there any questions more from the audience? Okay, we have here, Sita.
Thank you for the opportunity. Good afternoon, everyone. I want to ask to Mr. Lama, based on your presentation, how to get the opportunity in Indonesia shift on disaster preparedness. And the second question is, as far as you know, to inspire us to get ideas, how far as disaster mitigation has been done in Indonesia? Thank you.
So, I don't have a question. First question was, what are some of the relevant topics in finance when it comes to disaster related stuff? Okay. So I think we understood scholarship differently. When I said scholarship, exactly the one who got asked the scholarship. But I think we understood that in a different way. Yeah, let me try to answer that. Scholarships are typically a reward and an investment at the same time. So if I provide you with a scholarship, that means I'm rewarding you for what you have done, and I'm investing in you for what I think you will do in the future. So that's kind of my take. There's so many scholarships that I have applied for, and some that I haven't. So if you apply for a scholarship, what you really need to do is present yourself as someone who has done something. So if you're interested in scholarship in disaster relief, for example, you have to be able to demonstrate that you have done some disaster relief work in the past. But you also need to demonstrate that you have a sound plan, you have a good plan, a good idea of what you will do after you finish your exam. So, for example, I have done some scholarship interviews in the past, both as an interviewee and as someone who is interviewed for a scholarship. And something that I have learned from interviewing people for scholarship is that some people just want to study because they want to study, and that's not a good investment. if you really want to invest in something, then you want to make sure that your investment multiplies, right? So if you invest in one person, it's actually a lot of money. And actually that will populate. You do a master's study abroad, and that was like 2 billion for one person. And if you do a PhD, then you double that. So you want to make sure that your money multiplies. Your money multiplies the way that it doesn't go back to you. But if you spend that money on one particular person, then you'll make sure that that person does the benefit for another person. And so, for example, if you do disaster relief, then you will be doing another disaster relief. Write about disaster relief, or you actually help organization or establish an organization that will actually be one disaster work in the future. So hopefully that money multiplies the way that it's tested. What is the next question? What was the second question?
What is the mitigation being in Indonesia?
Okay. So we have actually looked from the same data. One is data that I took was from the site. Cyber uses Scopus database. Scopus is one of the biggest database for scholarly work in the world right now. But there are so many works that is not indexed in Scopus, and some of them are actually very important. That being said, because that's the biggest database, I'm doing whatever I can from the data that I'm doing.
Sorry. Anyway, that's also that we have a problem here. It's not really clear.
So, available, what has been extracted from the data is that we have a lot of work in disaster risk and disaster risk reduction. And what that means is that we have a lot of work in what we do before disaster. But we have fewer works in disaster preparedness, which means that what we should do when disaster strikes. And we have even fewer work. We have even fewer work in disaster recovery, which means that what we should do after the disaster happens, and what we should do to be able to prepare for the next disaster. Why is that important? Because you're not training for these volunteers in disaster relief. You're training to be hunters, and particularly city council. So when you're thinking of your profession, what you need to do is think about disaster as a site. Eventually disaster will happen, especially natural disasters, because in natural disasters are mighty forces that none of us can we can probably really avoid the risk of those disasters. So you really need what you can do after disasters to rebuild the city. When you rebuild the city, I think what Archie was trying to say was that you can rebuild the city that might mitigate the risks of those disasters, and B, might reduce the economic cost as well as the life costs that will happen to disasters. So I think that's what's important. If you really are interested in disaster-related topics for your master's thesis, then hopefully you're going to write about recovery. Hopefully you're going to write about preparedness, and hopefully you're going to write about future planning that is more resilient in size.
Okay, thank you so much, Sanjama, for answer. And I think Sita has some interest regarding the scholarship on the urban disaster, and hopefully you will be the leading authors for the scholars regarding the disaster risk. So let's move on. Does anyone have any questions? Okay. We have here Kika.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Tika, student from Magister in Urban and Regional Planning from University of Indonesia. I have a brief question for Ibu Mudia, hi Ibu, about how the city and the citizens be ready and adapt to deal with the disasters, including the disaster, non-disaster, and the future death.
Thank you. Maybe Larissa can also ask Ibu Veronica Pak Wali Tenang to share to answer the question from Tika, yes, but yeah, again, because the Ministry of National Planning is working together and partnering with the other ministry and agency, and now I'm partnering with the National Disaster Management Agency of NPB. So regarding the pre, during, and post disaster, NPB already have abundance of list of activities that each city or even province level and the national level need to then implement. And we have lots of regulation in the national level, and as the priorities like the minimum standards accuracy, SKM. So in the SKM, in the minimum standard accuracy, we have these simulation, gladi and simulasi, gladi dan simulasi. That is the duty of each BPBD or the local disaster management agency to assist a certain way in their area. For example, in Central Sulawesi province, that is Palu City area. So Palu City has the responsibility, especially the local disaster management agency, to then assist the community in the village level to have the simulation and then provide the information telling what is the risk in their area, and then they are teach to prepare the activities of preparedness, prevention, and then warning system, and also mitigation, and then assist them to prepare the plan. The village plan is actually the responsibility and assisted by the Ministry of Village and Disadaptation and Education. So we also work together with the Ministry of Village to make sure that within the village level, the community understand the risk, know how to respond to the risk if it happen in their area, and know what activity that they need, because in the village level we have this dana desa, village fund, and that they can use to then prepare the activities and fund the activities for their event, their capacity. That's one agenda, but maybe that can be an example. But within the implementation area, I think Nago understand more than I do, because I work in the national level and work the ministry and we rarely communicate directly to the village level. So again, collaboration, partnership, and coordination is important to make sure that everyone understands the condition of the. I think that's from me.
Okay, as was said by Budia, Miss Veronica Bell and Colin, do you have something to add? Okay.
Nothing more from me, thank you.
Anyone have any more questions? Veronica and Colin, do you have something to add? Sorry, I didn't see the screen. You have something to add?
No, we're fine, thank you.
No, okay. So we have many questions here from.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Nabila. I'm a student of Master Program of Urban and Regional Planning. My question is for Veronica Bell. The question is, what is the biggest challenge and how big is the challenge for Australian Red Cross to prepare and be ready for urban disasters? Thank you.
Just let me make sure I understood that. So the biggest challenge we face in
Miss Veronica Bell.
can I just make sure I've understood the question properly?
Hello, please.
Hello, are you able to hear me?
Yes, okay. Yes,
Excellent. I'm just confirming that the question is, what is the biggest challenge that we face?
Yes, it was what was the biggest challenge from Australia? Okay.
So I think that the biggest challenge that we face is, like all countries, we're seeing more frequent, more intense disasters. So they're happening more often, and their impact is greater. And unfortunately, we only anticipate that will continue to be the case as climate change makes its effects much more felt. So like everyone, like lots of the speakers have spoken about today, we're trying to ensure that we're as informed as possible, that we're engaging in the discussions that we need to be involved in, that we're thinking about what are the most appropriate ways of working. There is no one size fits all to the complexity of events that we're facing. And so, and nor can Australian Red Cross respond to everything on its own. So I think the biggest thing that we have to focus on is, where are we best placed to make the best contribution? And that means that we can't do certain things in order to do other things really well. So I think, like all organizations, we have to make choices. We have to think about where we can act and act to the greatest effect. And, you know, we need to be doing really good work, because attracting resources to be able to support this work is increasingly challenging. And so we need to be seen as a meaningful, respected player doing the work that we do, so that we continue to build trust, both from the communities that we're serving, but also the partners and governments that support us, and building that evidence base. So being able to demonstrate that the work that we are undertaking is effective, that it is affecting change, and even documenting when things don't go well, so that, you know, we all learn from those lessons. But I think, you know, definitely in Australia, we are seeing more disasters occur. They are bigger and they're happening more frequently. So that's the biggest challenge we face by a long way.
Okay, thank you so much, Veronica. I think someone was asleep. Okay, unfortunately, Dr. Andy to leave right now because something. Okay, thank you so much, Andy. Okay, I think there's someone sleeping. I think we'll do another.
Udah lebih juga.
Okay,
Itu aja ini. Gue nggak tahu.
camera is on, right? Your camera is on? Camera. I think that would be good. Okay, Colin and Veronica, your camera is on? Yeah, okay. One. Okay, where's the camera? Okay, 1, 2, 3. Thank you so much. Okay. So, another photo. We'd like to move on screen. Speakers, all in one frame.
So Veronica would like to accompany you.
Maybe you can, just.
So please.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Dia bareng sama dia, dia.
Gitu kali.
Iya, apa dia?
Dulu kali.
Dia sama dia.
Kamu itu gimana ya? Satu buat di mau masuk nggak?
Okay, thank you so much. Okay. I think everyone's ready. Okay. So, I have questions from our online participants. The question is for Miss Dia from Bapanas. So looking at the agenda, that is the pillar and the focus in 2045 in the future, one of which is the high quality of human resources, those who are educated, skilled, and master on science and technology. Looking at the agenda, is it possible for Bapanas through its youth partner organization or its youth capacity development sector as a demographic bonus in the future, which I know is SDGs Youth Hub and Youth Force 2030 under Bapanas, opening up for collaboration in developing a learning management system or to relearn with the project from a government organization. One of them is our program, the Urban Access Plan in Indonesia, which moves to encourage youth participations in creating a healthy, safe, and resilient urban environment. So, if there is any opportunity for the collaboration with government agencies for this education section can be done, how will this opportunity for hearing with governors be open to build initial communication. Thank you.
First, so we have this presidential regulation number 111, 2022. So one of our strategy is to involve everyone, no one left behind. So we are open to the participation of youth to support SDGs, achievement of SDGs goal, and we are preparing the mechanism. We will have this consultation forum, but maybe how the mechanism will start and run. So we are open for participation, and because it's already the dissemination of the presidential regulation. So I think we can start working together.
Okay. So I will answer the questions. So such an active discussion here. Do we still have time? Okay. So I have one question. Anyone can answer it. But so we know there is a disaster risk management system, and then we have another agenda from the government, section from another ministry. So how do you manage to what extent does the Ministry of Planning have that when there is another urgent agendas where it is overlapping with the regulation from the Ministry of Planning in terms of urban resilience, especially when it has happened in urban prone disaster areas? A very challenging question. I think maybe Pak Sunarko can add because you've been in the government, even though I'm not government, you can help me. But yeah, again, working in the government, we have challenges. You know, we said that we would integrate all, but there needs to be a commitment. Okay, yeah, that's why I mentioned partnership, collaboration, and coordination is very important. And the instrument is in the planning and budgeting. So we have the regular process of planning and budgeting. Something like for this November, we will start to create the planning process, to implement the planning process for annual plan 2004. And we also, because we have, again, I already explained that we have to prepare the agenda for 2025 and 2030. And in this process, sometime when we implement, like we set the annual plan in 2024 and 2023. But in 2024, there's this condition, like for example, the COVID-19 2020 and 2021, we have to challenge all the implementation creativity. So again, we have the regulation, the affirmative regulation, where when there is the emergency condition, the leader for the national level is the president. Okay, the government level. Yeah. The leadership is very important to then set the priority. But it will be for the all the and the priority can be the flexibility is there, but have the regulation. Yeah, the regulation. So I think I hope it's enough. Yes. So I think the collaboration is also the commitment and the leadership and also the consistency of leading the urban states. I think we have another question right here. It's from Wolfa.
Guys, it's such a big thing. It's not questions, but there's a project up here. Yeah, thank you so much for the discussion. We back into the aim of the event. We would like to, what to say, to operate the sense, right? Technologies or advanced criteria, for example, whether we also would like to use our sensitivity, yeah, for example, in this kind of disasters, yeah. And maybe before I close up with the wrap up for today, I would like to hear opinion from Sekolah and also Ibu Veronica, Miss Veronica, about their own perspective on how actually a planner should act when disaster runs. Yeah. For example, that would be my first question for you two. Thank you.
Thank you both, Mr. Colin and Miss Veronica.
Could you just repeat that question again? How should who act?
Yes, what Wolfa asks is, as a planner, hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So as a planner, how do you see, right? How do you think the planner should act regarding managing the disaster risk in your school perspective?
Gonna go first, Colin?
Okay. I definitely think one is understanding the risk which is there. I think that's really the most important. And as I think one of the presenters spoke about the different components of risk. I mean, understanding, the population, understanding what are they exposed to, the infrastructure which is being exposed, the hazards not just only happening now, but also the evolving hazards, the emerging hazards there, so which has been driven by climate change. So risk is definitely an important element for planners. And I think that would be really, either using, current data and also bringing in other stakeholders involved. It could be what you call, it needs to be from the government, it needs to be from academia to help us get that data, get that information, and then see how, it translates into risk and what is going to be the impact on the people, on our communities, and how we can better prepare for them. I think so. Really, that risk is the keyword. So that's my one point. I pass it back to Veronica. Over to you.
Thanks, Colin. I agree completely. I think understanding risk and taking the time to understand risk is really important. And with any planning project, there are lots of competing interests and lots of different agendas at play. And I think it's really important that the time is given to considering all the different options, and that there's all those voices that Colin mentioned in the discussion, because a developer is going to have a very different perspective to a community member, to somebody else who's looking from a different perspective. And I think you need all of those in the mix, and then you need a really good facilitation process to come to a very transparent decision. And I think that transparency of the decision is really important, because as the planner, you will be under huge pressure from all your constituents to make a decision that is what they would like to see. So I think, taking the time, engaging the right people, and ensuring that there's full transparency around how the decision's made is really fundamental to arriving at the right decisions, and for there to be good understanding of what sits behind it.
Okay, I think those are the question. So I think it's not just about the leadership that we need to also understand the disaster first. Then we also need to, what was said by Veronica and Colin, it's just that we need to be able to have a transparency decision. Although there is a lot of pressure, there still needs to be a transparency to the community, I think. Okay, it's really an active decision, and I think we still have more questions to ask, but unfortunately, it seems we've reached the end of our talk. So I'm sure some of us here still have do you have any questions? Okay, I think we have another things to show. On slide. Okay, please go.
So it's already like 3 hours it has been. Thank you so much for being here, all the audiences online and offline, and also of course for our honorable speakers online and offline as well. Please allow me to read short wrap-ups for our discussion today. So now we have the conclusion for the disasters, preventions, and how to deal with when and also causes and substances. Like I putting yourself in shoes, that would be very important message for today. Then after or most disaster, we need to recover the cities, but also the investment. And then last, the national agenda and missions prepared to bring Indonesia as a sustainable country as well as strengthening national resilience and governance. With that, I would like to thank again to our honorable speakers, Australian Red Cross, American Red Cross, and also PMI, so recognized also, of course, our program. Thank you so much.
I would like to thank you as well for the opportunity to stand here as a moderator and to be it's been such an honor to be involved such accomplished individuals. And thank you so much for joining our talk show today. Hopefully all of the presentations and the discussion today will be beneficial and inspiring to us. Thank you. Good day. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you.
Thank you, Colin and Veronica.
Thanks.
Good
Thanks,
night.
everybody.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you so much.
In aja. In aja meetingnya bukan? In aja. Stop